Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Pottstown. Anne is into harmonics, and I think there's something going on behind that because I sat there and I felt very, very calm and at peace. So I will, whether you intend it or not, it was a good thing. So I'm John Greason, lay leader today for our intermittent guest minister, Reverend Cheryl Meinschein, retired as a Lutheran minister. But in tune with our liberal thinking, we are a liberal, loving congregation. We hearken to the concepts of both Unitarianism, where we believe in a humanistic view that we can reinterpret our lives and our spirituality throughout our lifetime. And we hearken also to a subject near and dear to my heart, universalism, which was a simple concept that God would never consign anyone to a place that one would call hell, that all people are redeemable. And we amalgamated both faiths, and here we are today as Unitarian Universalists. We've been around for over 60 years in this location. We are small but mighty. We accept all who come in, regardless of backgrounds and creeds. We have no creed except our basic creed of the inherent worth and dignity of all people, in a sense, the illustrious golden rule. So first, as always, do we have any announcements for the good of the congregation? If so, please avail yourself of the mic, which is not here, so it will be up here, unless Emily finds it, hiding in the corner. We did have a labyrinth walk yesterday, and as Rick from IT says, things had to be deconstructed and reconstructed as we speak.
Right there. I'm Mary. I'm here as building incident grounds on October 7th. We hope y'all show up and have one of our work parties because it is fun. You know, you'll learn all kinds of things. We were going to do a bee search first, or a wasp search first, I should say. They keep popping up in different spots, but we've got quite a long list of things we need to do, primarily outside. But a couple of things inside. If we found the tiles and we have just enough, because Chad and I counted till I replace all the broken tiles over there. So next Sunday I will have the list up here. I should have had it today, but I forgot. So please mark your calendars. October 7th. We take young and old. Everybody can weed. You know, I'm not read still. One that I'm really good at. So please mark your calendars. I think it's like 9:30 to noonish, usually runs a little long, and bring your own lunch.
Okay, I'm Sue, and I'm working with Kim Culp on our Christmas Eve service with other people as well, but just something to think about until there's like a more formal announcement is whether or not you want to be involved in an all ages 5-scene play of Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol, which will be incorporated into the service. And it's not just for kids, so this is anybody that wants to be involved. There's 12 speaking roles, somewhere around there. We have to, iron out all the things, but I'm thinking about it. And if someone is maybe not here, you think they might be interested in having a couple roles, it'd be a really fun time for children and all generations to work together on something. Thanks.
Good morning, I'm Ruby, and I work with the children here. And two things. One, the D&D or discussion and donuts group, the tweens, we're starting to work through a curriculum called Amazing Grace, and it's about faith and redemption and making good choices. And so we'll be working on that for the next few months. And the other thing is, we have a field trip. Our next trip is the end of October 29th. We'll be going to Manatawny Manor to visit with residents there. and talk to them and bring them some joy and participate in their Sunday afternoon activity with them. So that's all I have. Thank you.
My only announcement is, you see reading glasses perched on my head. That's the result of having had cataract surgery, which got rid of my nearsightedness entirely. So nothing close up is legible anymore until I get my new glasses. The second comment to just make is I turned the heat on. I felt kind of damp in here. If any are feeling uncomfortable or hot, let Brandon know and he will ramp it down again. We all have different senses of when we're too hot or too cold. So for the call to worship, I will ring the chime. It reminds me of something I came to mind. We all have heard the famous poem by William Wordsworth. And oh, I didn't forget one thing. Yes, Mary was gesturing at me. Sorry. How can I forget? Easily. Chalice lighting. We have our guest chalice lighter. We light these chalice lights as well as other lights, which are a sign of our willingness to illuminate ourselves and to help us grow internally in our spirituality to lead a better life. And I think the task has been safely accomplished. So before I bring the chime to begin our official North-centered time here for worship, it reminds me of the famous poem by William Wordsworth. We've all read it at some point. In the first line, it goes on, and actually I read it. It was about spirituality. That is what William Wordsworth was writing about when he wrote the poem. But I will begin only with the fact that the world is too much with us. This is a time to close that down and center ourselves in this location. Our call to worship, and I'm staying in the theme. Our readings are going to be all about forgiving. Our hymns will all be about love. I couldn't find any hymns about forgiveness, but I felt that love is a good counterpoint on that subject, and so that's the dichotomy today. So I think we'll do the readers. So 477, forgive us that often we forgive ourselves so easily and others so hardly. Forgive us that we expect perfection from those to whom we show none. Forgive us for repelling people by the way we set a good example. Forgive us for the folly of trying to improve a friend. Forgive us, or forbid, that we should use our little idea of goodness as a spear to wound those who are different. Forbid that we should feel superior to others when we are only more shielded. And may we encourage the secret struggle of every person. One of our people, Vivian Pomeroy, had authored this. So we don't have Carly with us today, but Anne is going to do the best she can to work with the piano. And these are all things we've sung many times before. So please rise as you're able for hymn number 6, which is just as long as we have breath. shown today from the children, and I can see in the future, maybe we will someday have a children's chorus or choir. I have expressed before that I would love the children to do a service with the guidance of the adults. I think it's kind of overdue. Sorry, yes, so, sorry. Moving on, it's time for all ages, and I will pass the mic. Something a mic holder if needed. Only the other, hang on. We'll make it work.
I can just be loud.
There we go. No, I got it.
Okay.
You can be loud also.
Hello. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Okay, happy first day of fall. Fall is a time of abundance, and this story is about the abundance that Sarabella finds in her mind. And this is called Sarabella's Thinking Cap. It's one of my favorite stories, and it's by a lady named Judy Shaner, and she actually lived down the street from my grandmom in Swarthmore, Pennsylvania, not too far from here. Sarabella's Thinking Cap. Sarabella had no time for small talk. In fact, she never talked much at all because she was too busy thinking. She thought about big things and small things. There's a little snail, if you could see it. And oodles of in-between things like ants and uncles and doodles of poodles. And she asks our little cat, "What do you think, Pinky?" Fish on my mind. Pinky's thoughts would remain a mystery, but there was nothing mysterious about her family. They loved puppets, painting pictures, and playing guitar. Most of all, they loved their Sarabella just the way she was, with her feet on the ground and her head in the clouds. To Sarabella, there was nowhere she would rather be than dreaming of painted ponies racing across the sky. Some ideas came as complete surprise to her, while other notions were coddled and cared for like rare plants in a well-loved garden. "I need to read up on you, mister," she says to that plant. There was never a doubt that Sarabella had a green thumb for thinking. The problem was, no one ever knew what she was thinking about. Her teacher, Mr. Fantozzi, had a knack for knowing just what Sarabella wasn't thinking about, and that was schoolwork. Sometimes all it took was a word, a sound, or the scent of Samantha's magic markers to carry her thoughts away. And that's when Mr. F, who was really very nice, had to send her home with another note, and this made Sarabella feel terrible. The notes never upset her parents because once upon a time, they got sent home with notes too. "Really?" said Sarabella. "Really," replied her mom. "You have daydreams in your DNA. At bedtime, Sarabella cuddled up to her big sister Cece. "I wish I knew how to focus," said Sarabella. "It's easy," said Cece. "All you have to do is take deep breaths and squint." At school the next day, Sarabella followed her sister's advice, but all she got was a dizzy spell and a visit to the school nurse for an eye test. One night during a math facts memorizing meltdown, a bear of a thought dropped by for a chat. "I have a good head for numbers," he said. Numbers in his head. "I can see that," replied Sarabella. "Keep me in mind if you ever need help," said the bear. "I'll consider it," said Sarabella, and that was her first mistake. The second was taking the bear to school the next day. "I sure hope you left some room in your head for math facts," said her sister. There was always room in Sarabella's brain for one more tantalizing thought. just not make sense. By the time they arrived in class, the bear had fallen asleep, but waiting in the wings was an odd flock of birds who didn't know the difference between an egg and the number 8. That's when she heard Mr. F calling her nickname. "Earth to cerebellum," he said. "A penny for your thoughts?" "She's not thinking," said Russell, "she's daydreaming." "Daydream is an awesome kind of thinking," said Mr. F, "but not during class." That afternoon, Sarabella stayed in recess to catch up on her work. She liked sitting at the round table in the quiet room. "I know you can do this, Sarabella," said Mr. F, handing her the very last quiz. "Just put on your thinking cap and focus." Sarabella began to imagine what her thinking cap might look like, and then she turned back to her papers. Right before the bell rang, Mr. F had Sarabella hand out the weekend assignment. They were always something fun. And the weekend assignment is here, and it says, "A penny for your thoughts, draw a picture of your favorite daydreams." "What do you think, Sarabella?" asked Mr. F. An otter popped into her mind, but that was just the first thing. Before she got home, kissed Pinky, and put on her comfy bunny slippers, Sarabella had already thought of 1,000 extraordinary things. By dinner time, she'd run out of paper, had an upset tummy, and a great big mess on her hands. That night, just as Sarabella was about to give up, a whale of a thought appeared on the horizon. The closer it got, the more beautiful it became. And though it was the most enormous creature she had ever seen, Sarabella felt unafraid. "Do you know what I think?" asked the whale. "I can see what you think," replied Sarabella. "And so should everyone else," said the whale. "To share it, you've just got to wear it." Then the whale blew Sarabella a kiss before she swam off. This gave Sarabella an idea. She found a brown paper bag and a ruler for measuring. Then she rounded up some old magazines, pretty papers, pencils, pastels, stickers, and stamps, along with her favorite drawings. For the rest of the night, she clipped and colored, pasted, and painted until her project was done. Monday morning, everyone was eager to share their weekend project. "A penny for your thoughts," said Mr. F, as the kids sat crisscross applesauce on the floor. "Who's going first?" To the surprise of all, it was Sarabella. "If you want to share it," she said, standing up in front of the class, "you've just got to wear it." And that's exactly what Sarabella did when she placed the most spectacular collection of doodles and daydreams right on top of her head. "So that's what you've been thinking," said the kids in awe. Laura saw unicorns, and Xavier saw planets. Dylan saw a cat, a snake, and a feather, while Nate reported seeing clouds with a touch of bad weather. "A penny for your thoughts, Mr. F," said Sarabella. "I think," he said with a smile, your thoughts are worth all the pennies in the world." On Tuesday, Bob came to school wearing a thinking cap of his own. Sarabella really liked it. "We have a lot in common," said Bob. "My thoughts exactly," agreed Sarabella. So for our last time today, I think we're going to make a thinking cap with all your thoughts, however you want to do it, okay? So we can all share our ideas.
Okay, the children, who are numerous, which is lovely, pick themselves up. We will sing the children to clap. Okay, so it's that time in our service, which is present in all of our services, where we pass our baskets. We ask for your generosity. We always ask for three things: time, treasure, and talent. And this is one of those T's that helps keep the lights on and keep us thriving. So as you are able, we will appreciate whatever you can provide. Thanks all for your generosity. The UFT will always appreciate it. Our next reading is a responsive reading, which is number 637. I will read what is in the regular print, and you folks can do the italic. So, as you're able, 637, which is called the Litany of Atonement. I would comment, I was going to get this in today, that Yom Kippur, the Jewish faith, is tomorrow. And in the Jewish faith, there was something very similar to this, which were probably up to 100 different potential sins and inequities. And it was done in case you might have forgotten any in your own efforts to atone. The prayer book was going to help you, lest you get written out of the book of life. So a bit of a sinister concept, but we take a more gentle view. So 637, a litany of atonement. Let's see if we can go with the readers. For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference. For each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible. For each time that we have struck out in anger without just cause. For each time that our greed has blinded us to the needs of others. For the selfishness which sets us apart and alone. For falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit. For losing sight of our unity. For those and for so many acts both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of separateness. And then in counterpoint, on a more joyous note, we will sing hymn number 95. And so I invite you to arise as you are able to do so and willing. There's more love somewhere. This, I think, will be a cappella.
I want to try something with you. Because I think it'll be fun.
By the way, a cappella, having been in Italy, means in the chapel, although we use it to mean without accompaniment.
Okay, so, yeah, we're going to try this a cappella. Okay. So, Emily and I are going to sing through it, and if you want to join in if you know it, and then as we go through the verses, then we will all join together. So, I'll just do this for the tempo.
So now it's time for me to turn the platform over to the professional. As I'm just a stand-in here. Reverend Cheryl Meinschein has been with us a number of times. She has been a Lutheran minister for her career, had enough of that, and went on to become a paralegal. And in her spare time, among other things, we're graced with her presence about once a quarter on a subject that she thinks will be intriguing to us and will lead, hopefully, to our spiritual growth going forward. So all of our sermons have been thought-provoking. As always, we can leave some time after the sermon for comments from the people in the audience. So it's stimulating to have feedback if it's appropriate. So without any further ado, Reverend Cheryl.
Good morning. Good to be here on this lovely fall day. I'm guessing that I have struggled with the topic of forgiveness for about the last 50 years or more. The first time I remember occurred on a Sunday morning on the way home from church. And one of the lessons that was read that day was part of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. The verses that had caught my attention were from the book of Matthew, chapter 5, verses 21 and 22. Jesus said, "You have heard that it was said to the men of old, 'You shall not kill, and whoever kills shall be liable to judgment.' But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother shall be held to judgment. Whoever insults his brother shall be liable to the council, and whoever says, 'You fool,' shall be liable to the hell of fire." At the ripe old age of 10 or so, I was convinced that I was done for. Although I don't think I had ever literally called my brother a fool, I'm sure I had used words that were similar, and I doubted Jesus was going to quibble over the details. I was toast. And I don't remember how long it took my mother to talk me down from that one. My next major questioning time came during seminary. After our first summer, one of my classmates, a single mom, came back to school without her 7-year-old son. Her ex-husband had taken Caleb for a summer vacation and then had disappeared off the face of the earth, not to reappear for another 20 years. What can forgiveness possibly mean in a situation like that? And then you may recall on October 2nd, 2006, a shooting occurred at the West Nickel Mines School, an Amish one-room schoolhouse in the Old Order Amish community of Nickel Mines, Pennsylvania. Gunman Charles Carl Roberts IV took hostages and shot 10 girls aged 6 to 13, killing 5 before committing suicide in the schoolhouse. The response of the Amish, calling for the forgiveness of the shooter as well as caring for his family, astonished the world. Scholars of Amish life noted that grudges, letting go of them, is a deeply rooted value in their culture, which remembers martyrs, including Jesus himself, who forgave those who killed him. They explain that the Amish willingness to forgo vengeance doesn't undo the tragedy or pardon the wrong, but rather constitutes a first step toward a future that is more hopeful. And that kind of forgiveness is just about beyond my comprehension. So let's try to come up with a definition of forgiveness, starting with that ancient authority, Wikipedia. In Judaism, and please correct me if I'm wrong, if a person causes harm, but then sincerely and honestly apologizes to the one who is wrong and tries to make it right, the wronged individual is encouraged, but not required, to grant forgiveness. If one sincerely apologizes 3 times for that wrong, then they have fulfilled their obligation to seek forgiveness. That means that in Judaism, a person cannot obtain forgiveness from God for wrong done to another person. That has to come from the person. Coincidentally enough, as John mentioned, tonight begins Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, which occurs on the day before God makes decisions regarding what will happen to an individual during the coming year. Just prior to Yom Kippur, Jews ask forgiveness of those they have wronged during that year, if they haven't already done so. And during Yom Kippur itself, Jews fast and pray for John's forgiveness for the transgressions they have made against God, and sincere repentance is required. In Christianity, if you would read the Christian part of the Bible, you would see that forgiveness is central to Christian ethics. In the prayer that Jesus taught his followers to pray, known as the Lord's Prayer, the prayer begs God to forgive us our debts or our sins or our trespasses, as we have forgiven those who trespass or sin against us. I've always wondered does that mean that God is not going to forgive you unless you forgive others or in the way you forgive others? And scholars have argued about what that word "as" means. I don't know. Sounds kind of scary. In Matthew 18:21-35, when Peter, one of Jesus' disciples, asked Jesus how many times he was required to forgive somebody, the traditional view was 7 times. But Jesus said, no, not 7, but 70 times 7. And in my compulsive nature, I would try to keep track, but that was Jesus' way of saying, too many to keep track, just keep forgiving. It's a way of warning people that God's forgiveness depends on you forgiving other sins against you. The Amish in particular take this teaching very seriously. Islam teaches that Allah is the all-forgiving and is the original source of all forgiveness. Seeking forgiveness from Allah with repentance is a virtue. Islam recommends forgiveness because Allah values forgiveness. It also allows revenge to the extent of harm done, but forgiveness is encouraged because you will be rewarded. In Buddhism, forgiveness prevents harmful thoughts from causing havoc on one's own mental state and recognizes that feelings of hatred and ill will have a lasting effect on your psyche. Buddhism encourages the cultivation of thoughts that leave a more wholesome effect and places emphasis on loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity as a means to avoid resentment. In Hindu Dharma, a person who does not forgive carries baggage of memories of the wrong, of negative feelings, and of anger and unresolved emotions that affect their present as well as their future. And as in before, forgiveness in Hindu philosophy is being compassionate, tender, kind, and letting go of the harm or hurt caused by something or someone else. If you remember seeing news clips about the Festival of Colors, where colors are sprayed, that's the Hindu festival Holi, which is celebrated in the spring. And this part I didn't know, I remembered the colors. It's a day to mark forgiveness, meet others, and repair relationships. So while all these religions talk about the importance of forgiveness, they don't really give us a definition. In the Christian Bible, the Greek word for forgiveness literally means to let go, such as forgiving someone for a debt that is owed to you. I looked at the Templeton Foundation's Forgiveness Scientific Advisory Council, yes, there is such a thing, who defines forgiveness as a conscious decision to let go of the negative and build positive thoughts and feelings, and sometimes even motivations toward an offender. The decision to forgive is a rational one even before the emotions start to change. It's a first step. And forgiveness can be directed toward others or even toward yourself for things that you have done that you feel badly about toward yourself or others. Now, one of the things, here's your trivia question for the day. Where does the phrase forgive and forget come from? Any guesses? I know it's not biblical. My second guess is always Benjamin Franklin and Poor Richard's Almanac. That's not right either. But it probably came from Cervantes in his 1605 work, Don Quixote. That was a surprise, where the proper quote is, "Let us forget and forgive injuries." So if you're ever on Jeopardy and that comes up, now you know. As I was getting ready for this morning, I found a really interesting video by psychiatrist Stephen Marmer. And he said that psychologists tend to define forgiveness as a deliberate decision to release feelings of anger, resentment, or vengeance towards someone who has hurt you. And what he did that I thought was really helpful was that he divided forgiveness into 3 categories. The first was called exoneration. And literally that means wiping the slate clean and fully restoring the relationship to as it was before. It is forgive and forget. When you exonerate someone, it's as if that harmful action never took place. And Marmer would say there are 3 basic types of occurrences that would be appropriate for exoneration. One is the hurtful situation, which was a complete accident for which no fault or blame could be made. If you're at a party and someone dumps a glass of red wine on your sofa, it's an accident. You could forgive that because no harm was intended. Or if the person who committed the offense is a child or someone who wasn't capable of understanding the implications of their actions. If a child with a glass of red Kool-Aid dumps it on your sofa because they weren't paying attention, that's forgivable. Or the person who hurt you is truly sorry and takes full responsibility for what they've done. Those would be examples of times when exoneration is appropriate. The second category he calls forbearance, and that happens when an offender either makes a partial apology or lessens their apology by suggesting that you're partially to blame for what happened in the first place. You may have experienced that. While an apology may in fact be offered, it's not usually what you hoped for and can seem inauthentic. But if it's someone who's important in your life, you may choose to exercise forbearance and let it go, even if you bear no responsibility for what happened and the apology is less than perfect. The example I could think of for this was asking a friend not to share a particular confidence, and they do. And they come back to you and say something like, well, I thought you wouldn't mind if Sally knew because Sally's a friend of yours too. You know, it's that kind of having the person who needs to offer the forgiveness being given part of the blame. That's where you might choose to use forbearance, where you're not going to let that hang on, but you're going to be a little cautious about what you share with that person in the future. And last but not least, the last category of forgiveness he calls release, which applies to situations in which the person who hurt you has never acknowledged any wrongdoing. And examples of situations where release might be called for are in situations of child abuse or domestic violence, business people cheated by partners, or betrayal by friends or relatives. And if those kinds of situations, forgiveness has to take on a whole different kind of response, I think. And here he believes that we should do so. And he said it's a much lower level of release. You don't need to continue the relationship, but you do need to let go of your bad feelings, feelings of revenge, and preoccupation with the negative thing that happened to you. And release allows you to move on. Why forgive? Science tells us that forgiveness is connected to a whole bunch of mental and physical health benefits, such as social well-being. And some research has even shown that forgiving thoughts have the capacity to change our physiology, such as our heart rate, muscle tension, fight or flight response, and neurobiological function. It's been linked to better cognitive functioning and even longevity. And lack of forgiveness, well, you can guess what that can lead to. Depression, panic and anxiety attacks, and stress. I think all of us can think of at least one person who is so caught up in hurtful situations and unable to let go that it really does unhelpful things to their mental health. I can think of people by name. The next question then is, knowing that forgiveness is good for us, or at least that letting go of the hurt and not having it control our lives, how do we get there? And if you would Google forgiveness, you would find a whole raft of suggestions on how to begin that process. The one I thought I'd share with you this morning is called 9 Steps to Forgiveness. by Fred Luskin, who directs the Stanford University Forgiveness Project. Like I said, there is a ton of stuff out there. And he starts by saying, know exactly how you feel about what happened, and be able to talk about what it is in that situation that is not okay. Then tell a couple of trusted friends about your experience. Next, make a commitment to yourself to feel better. Forgiveness is really for you as much as for anyone else. 3, forgiveness does not necessarily mean reconciling with the person who upset you or condoning the action. And I think that's a common misunderstanding for us. For a lot of folks, they think forgiveness is saying it doesn't matter. Well, sometimes it does. In forgiveness, you seek the peace and understanding that comes from blaming people less and taking those offenses less personally. 4, get the right perspective on what is happening. Recognize that your primary distress is coming from the hurt feelings or thoughts that you are suffering now, and not what offended or hurt you long ago. 5, at the moment you feel upset, practice stress management to soothe your body's fight or flight response. 6, give up expecting things from your life or from other people that they do not choose to give you. Don't let that other person or that situation have power over your present or future happiness. You will suffer when you demand that these things occur, since you can't make them happen. 7, put your energy into looking for another way to get your positive goals met. 8, remember that a life lived well is your best revenge. Instead of focusing on your wounded feelings and thereby giving power over you to the person who caused you pain, learn to look for the love, beauty, and kindness around you. It's a question of focus. 9, amend the way you look at your past so you remind yourself of your heroic choice to forgive and to let go. That's a lot of stuff. And there's even more out there if you go looking for it. But let me recommend, this is a DVD, but it's also available, you can find it if you Google it online. It's called The Power of Forgiveness. It's a documentary which also, it talks about the nickel mines community and the Amish, but it also features Elie Wiesel, who talks about going to the German parliament and talking about forgiveness and the Holocaust and what that might look like. And also Thich Nhat Hanh, if you've heard of him. So, open for questions. Forgiveness can be a tough, tough thing. It can be a hard thing. But I think we owe it to ourselves to try to come to some relationship with it, to repair relationships that can be repaired and to let go of those which cannot be. But thank you. Questions, comments, thoughts? Are you too depressed thinking about forgiveness?
All of a couple points. So, a couple thoughts. Number one, it has been said that resentment is a poison you swallow to hurt somebody else. And kind of pertinent to what's been said here, so you just keep on poisoning yourself, hoping that the other person will vicariously suffer, which they do not. The second is, with regard to Elie Wiesel, people have asked Holocaust survivors how they moved on with life. And they had to go through some of these same, not so much forgiveness, but maybe release. They had to go forth because if they didn't, they couldn't live their lives. They would be torturing themselves endlessly. And so if we ask Holocaust survivors, that's a common answer. They just had to not forget about it, but they had to, as you said, they couldn't really get to the people. And Elie Wiesel, other people hunted them down, but they had to let go of it and move on with their lives and release, as you said, for their own psychological well-being. So those are, I guess, the two things that need to be in passing.
Yeah, a friend of mine is a researcher for the UN, and she did a program on how religion has impacted domestic violence in Africa. And she found that while religious communities can be helpful, they can also not be because of the stand they take on forgiveness. And some of, especially the more conservative branches, it was studying Islam and Christianity in particular. Some of the more conservative branches of those faiths took a very conservative view of marriage, which said you stay no matter what. And that's a view of forgiveness that I'm not willing to espouse.
One more, what, we had a speaker, sorry, from the mainline Unitarian Universalist Church, who spoke to us, and some of you may remember him. He spoke about our first principle, which is accepting the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And one of the questions that he brought up, that you brought up, is how do you factor in a person as evil as Adolf Hitler? Do you believe that he, among other people who have been guilty of similar atrocities, but for my faith of origin, did in 5.5 million people of my religion just because of ethnic cleansing, you know, how do you process that? And I don't think he ever gave a satisfactory answer to this group as to how we would regard him and see any inherent worth and dignity in that person, but I'll kind of leave that hanging.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd tell me what the answer was. Other thoughts?
What, I was just thinking about when you mentioned the Albion, here in Pennsylvania, the people in Charleston, where the Dylan Root killed after meeting with them, they forgave. And that was, or good, most of them did, I guess, both of them. But, and I was like, how could you possibly do that? And, you know, you sort of think, okay, I can see letting go, but forgiveness is a tough cut. You know?
Yeah, depends how you define forgiveness.
Yeah, it's how you know, it's like, okay, well, I accept it, say, okay, but I don't know how you, I understand.
There was another case, and I'm gonna forget the state, but a female police officer killed a black man in his apartment because she thought he was in her apartment. She was mistaken. And at the trial, or at the sentencing, the brother of the man who was killed hugged the police officer and told her he forgave her. That I don't know how you do that.
Was there anything in your research about the continual forgiveness of continued pain or continued? The reason I'm bringing this up is because I got into a random conversation with a man at the Verizon store about the same conduct, and he had such anger at the continued tax payments to keep this man in our country under lock and key and pay for his food and his health care and his bed for the rest of his life, when he cost our community so much and he was a killer. And just listening to the anger in him and those continued tax payments to pay for this person. And I'm just wondering, how do you, every April 15th, you know, I'm thinking about like, well, I don't agree with this. This is not what I want to do, but I have to do it. I don't know if that's making sense.
Yeah. I guess for me, I would try to find a way to redirect that anger. Is there a way I can change it, or change the laws, or donate to another cause as well? If you stop paying your taxes, that's gonna get you in trouble.
Right.
And if I didn't have to pay taxes for everything I disagree with, I'd be a rich woman. But yeah.
But I continued, like, I would give and let go, release, like John for releasing that hold on control.
Yeah, there's not an easy answer. I would try to redirect it somehow, because the anger certainly isn't hurting the person in jail, but it's probably making him crazy.
I just wanted to share one of my own experiences. So I've had lots of things to forgive in my life, and I'm just sharing my own perspective and my own experience with it. Is when I got to the point where I could see this person and these people as souls, just thinking them not as people, just thinking of them as souls, and like that they're here having an experience and they're working through their own stuff, and sometimes as a soul, they're not conscious. We've all been to the place where we've done something unconsciously, we haven't been aware of it. And so there are certain things that we all do that are like that, and you can just say like, this soul is having this experience of not being conscious to the point where they are actually causing harm to other people. And so that's how I've been able to work through forgiveness myself. So just throwing that out there.
So sort of way learn or believe whatever is true. That the thoughts that people have are not always, they're often just running through their minds, and that's that sort of animal mind. So that's one thing. And then if someone does something wrong, it could be that when they did what they did, they were acting on a thought that we know is what we need to learn, something that it's whatever part of the brain is fight or flight. So we don't know what they believe, but somehow that thought got acted on. And because I know that that's true of me, that I have running thoughts, and I have to sort of clarify and sort of look at my thoughts and say, you know, is this just a running thought, or is this actually something, a conclusion or rational thinking conclusion that I came to? That I always have to be aware of that, or I always try. Don't always succeed, but so often I think people are the victim of not realizing that they are not their thoughts, that they don't have to do what they're thinking. That I would then have to extend them forgiveness because they're not aware that they don't have to do what they're thinking, or they don't have to act on what they're thinking. And we don't know from one person to the next who is aware that their thoughts are not necessarily, your thoughts are not who you are, or are not necessarily true. So people are kind of fooled by their own thoughts. So that makes them sort of like me, human. And so I guess that's where forgiveness would come from. I'm not always successful. just what thought are they acting on? And then what Kim asked, you know, if I met that man in that place, I would thought, well, that man's thoughts are just wild. They're running. You know, he's not able to get out of his thoughts.
Thank you.
Well, it's funny, there was a post about forgiveness on Facebook that I saw just the other day, and while you were talking, I was thinking about it, and I found it. She was like, really good there. I don't know how many people are familiar with Jennifer Curry. She was part of the mom died. She was a child actress, I think, or something. When she was younger, she had an incredible plot and probably at least a relationship with her mother. I haven't read the book yet, but it is on the list for memory, so coming up. But I found this post where she had said in an interview, I worked towards forgiveness for a really long time, and my therapist said one day, what if you don't have to work for forgiveness? And I went. And someone who shared that quote said, my life changed. My life has changed when I realized that I don't have to forgive. That energy dissipated completely, and I was able to let that relationship go for real. Not forgiving isn't solving poison, making yourself sick. Not forgiving if you don't want to is freeing. And I was thinking about that in the context of the three types of forgiveness we're talking about, and it seemed to me like, you know, Janet McCurdy and Kristen Thomas from her quote are thinking more of exoneration and forbearance, and
they're finding release in letting go of the thought they have to be their exonerated for this. And yeah, like you don't have to say things then, and say to yourself, or just letting go. The feeling that you're doing.
The song that keeps going through my mind is from Frozen, the Let It Go, which was such a phenomenal, people's reaction to that song was so phenomenal. And I wonder if it had something to do with a deep-seated need to release a whole bunch of things for all of us. And which is not to say what you did is fine or doesn't matter or whatever, but just to let it go. Anything else? Okay, thank you.
And as always, Reverend Cheryl is so good at giving a sermon that makes us think and respond. And because of that, even though I love the closing hymn, I'm going to pass on that because time is going on. I think we fruitfully used our time today in discussion about forgiveness. I love Norbert Capek, one of our martyrs who died in a concentration camp. One wonders about his forgiveness. I believe the story is that he actually gave to others in the concentration camp, which may have hastened his own demise. That's another story for another time. So at this point, I would ask that we close down the recording. I'll save Anna from the last hymn. We're going to pass on that for right now because I think it's more important that we move on to the next part whenever Rick tells me. Normal prayer, if you will, for the extinguish the chalice. So please join me. We extinguish the flame, the not the light of wisdom, the warmth of community, these we have in our hearts and in our hands, and we are together again. And in the spirit of ecumenism, the closing words are attributed to St. Francis of Assisi. It's only part of his actual reading, if you will. It's kind of been made sort of non-biblical or non-Christianic, if you will. But I think it still has a great message in the part that I'm going to read. So where hate rules, let us bring love. Where there is sorrow, joy. Let us strive more to comfort others than to be comforted, to understand others than to be understood, to love others more than to be loved. For it is in giving that we receive, and it is in pardoning that we are pardoned. Go in peace. Namaste, shalom, blessed be.